Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman, where we view the world through the lens of showmanship. I am Captain Frodo, and as always, I will be your host and gracious guide along the way. And by now, we are well and truly into the third season, which is the season of conversations. We've had, this will be the 10th conversation, I believe, interrupted by my personal yearly birthday celebration, where I share my shared birthday with the pandemic, some thoughts. But today we are launching into a two-part conversation with Tom Greder, a very interesting and very knowledgeable and accomplished performer, director, and creator of really distinct and extremely innovative performances, like his shows. He's got a show called Panorama Kino Theatre, where it's hard to sort of exactly say, but it's like the audience of the show sits inside a box that can actually pivot around, and they look out as if from a cinema screen. On the outside, he is directing the audience, which is made up of as in passers-by, and he creates a show for the people inside using audience members, random passers-by from the outside. I have not had the pleasure of seeing this, but from all that I have seen and all the reports that I've heard, it is an amazing experience. When I first met him in Australia, he was performing together with Trent Arkley-Smith in the clown duo Oscar and Strudel, and they still perform to this day, and they are just, I remember seeing it and being completely blown away, musical, and yeah, great clowning. Anyway, don't want to go through too much of his biography and all of his interesting shows, but I've already become very interested in talking to him, perhaps with helping me with some of my future ideas. So yeah, without much further ado, I'd like to pass over just to the conversation. But I just want to sort of point out this, that I don't know if I've sort of spoken it out loud so much on the podcast before, but that this isn't really the kind of podcast where we are talking biographically about what people do. So if you ever, you hear the people on my podcast, we don't go through their list of accomplishments, at least not on a sort of generally. That's not what we do. We just dive straight in and start talking about ideas. I believe ideas are kind of like spaces. It's like a place that you can visit, and each idea can be visited again and again with different people, and you see slightly different things. So with that said, let's jump into the world of ideas with Tom Greder.
Quickly, I realised that us soft pink whiteys that grew up in Switzerland and Australia have absolutely no tolerance for stressful situations, and when the shit hits the fan, we are hopeless. All the immigrants here, all the asylum seekers are going, hey, there's avocados in the shop. Where's the problem?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's I guess it's the thinking a little bit of the Princess of the Pea. It might be like first world problems. So they are much more equipped to do it, but it's still real for the princesses. We're like, oh no, but it's like there's a chance there mightn't be no toilet paper, and it blows us away.
Yeah, I know. Look, I mean, I think it's like when I go on tour, you work, then you have a break, and that's when you get sick, because that's when you're sort of able to get sick. And everyone pushed, well, a lot of people pushed through the pandemic stuff, and it's only afterwards. I mean, it hit me pretty hard just afterwards.
Oh, yeah.
The wall started coming in afterwards, not during it,
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think it's you gear up, you toughen up for it. And then, not that everyone, of course, made it through without, I mean, it was a really hard, challenging time for a lot of people.
Yeah.
But me, it hit afterwards. I just had to get to Australia. I got to Australia and just decompressed and gathered my thoughts. And I'm really glad I was able to make it away. So everything's good now again.
Yeah, it's it was a tricky time for everybody. You really, and I mean, it was for everybody, but for us, same as like people who deal with hospitality or whatever, but anyone who deals with groups of people, and we all got hit so hard. It was like a trial designed specifically for us, and also because of just the general kind of feeling that people have with art, that it's the first thing that can go and that it doesn't necessarily matter. It also meant that it took a while for things to come back online again for us, because people kind of went, oh, it's just the performers or whatever. And me realizing that although I feel like I am such a versatile performer, I do family shows and I do kids shows, and I do adult shows, but the thing which makes me who I am, and it really drove home the kind of philosophy or the kind of structural aspects of the way of the showman that I've been talking about this last season, of the showman and the audience as being actually one unit. I am not fully myself without them being there. And really that was driven home in that year and a half when there was practically not a single show. And I realized that all my skills, like it became not abstract anymore, because I'd had this idea that the showman and the audience is kind of one unit and the show is a third thing that sort of emerges between us. But when the audience was taken away, I was left there without the picture on the puzzle pieces, all the puzzle pieces that I have, that is part of what I love, part of what I'm interested in, and part of what makes meaning in my life, all just were now little islands, not connected anymore. And it was all kind of strange. And so that really sort of drove it home for me how symbiotic that relationship actually is.
And how needy in a way. You know?
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
That just triggers a couple of thoughts for me. I saw it as a test for retirement.
Yeah.
How am I going to go without them, without that? The other thing, a friend of mine dropped over and he said, how you doing? I said, I think I need to do some work, because if you take away all the distractions and all the folly of touring around the world in this world of fantasy on stage, who are you left with? If you take all the stuff away, who are you left with? And I said, I have to be honest, Bitter and Twisted isn't completely out of the question. I've got a little work to do.
That's a great point. It's also this thing in my mind where when I was trying to break down, like, okay, what is an act or whatever, and you got the character, that's always an aspect in there, or like there's a person on stage. It's a pretty wide, but I kept also thinking of this thought of, we work on our character and how it's going to, like, how are we being perceived in the show and how we're doing. But I was recognizing in myself that maybe I hadn't spent enough time working on the character that I am all the time, like to get a wider kind of human aspect onto it. And that also became kind of clear to me, like that performers might, consider the time we are on stage and be really sort of thoughtful about that, or at least some of us are. And maybe we don't spend as much time on that character, and that's the character that you are all the time. And I think there's a full core. Either you have to pretend to be somebody very nice and very interesting, and then you have to be a very good actor, or you just you are. So you got to work on yourself as well, and that was really a big thing for me as well. It seems to mirror that what you just said.
Oh, there's a whole bag of stuff in there, a whole Pandora's box of, another dear friend of mine who's not a performer said to me once, Tom, what are you running away from? And I said, I don't know. I kind of feel I'm running towards something. But the longer it's gone, the many, many years since then, she had a legitimate point about that stuff. You never really know what's what, but at least on stage, it's not real. At least there I know what is or isn't. So I think whole bunch of stuff about, how do artists in particular define themselves? You said the thoughtful ones, I think it is also their business to inhabit their experience as a person, as a human, the whole existential stuff. So in a way, the people that they naturally are, I think, tend to be quite deep and rich. Not that they're totally sorted out or anything like that, but I think generally speaking, we're quite aware of the feelings that we have inside. I mean, when you're developing a character, you have to recognize the little voices inside, and it's always the little voices that give you the biggest messages. It's not the dancing girls and the smoke and mirrors and stuff. It's the little keep tapping you that are easy to ignore. Or those feelings you have and go, hang on, the last time I experienced this, I was just about to put my foot in it. So shut up. The longer you go, the more you recognize those little feelings. I think that the better you know yourself. But it's a challenge. It's a constant challenge. And I do miss the running away. I do miss being lost. I mean, my go-to comfort zone is being lost in a foreign country, in a foreign city, with a language I don't know, late at night alone. It's just fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly something to be said for that direct sort of lostness in the real world, because if you're feeling lost as a person in your I will often define those, like, because you have the show and then the man, and you have the show aspect, which is an intrinsic part of who I am, but there's also that human man aspect, as a man, as in human. And if those two are mirroring each other, if you're sort of a bit lost as to what to do with your life, the concreteness of being in the world and that mirroring of the two. I think Dante's Inferno opens with this thing of going, where he says he awakes and he finds himself lost in the dark forest, and he has to make his way out of it or whatever. And that's what he sort of does in the, not Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, but it's the opening kind of bit of that. In the middle of my life, I find myself lost in the dark wood or whatever. And I'm thinking, I'm like in my 40s now, just tipping past mid 40s. And I'm lost in that. And maybe that thing of being lost in the world out there in a language that you don't speak, that also mirrors in a way that existential feeling of when those two things, maybe they're the way that we are sort of making things up on the stage, that you have to make it up as you go along in the world too, and the concreteness of having to do it in the real world, that somehow calms you down in the way that if you're feeling depressed or what, sometimes like, okay, well, we have to chop the wood, have to carry all of that in, and then after a really useful practical task where you don't ask any questions of why we're doing it, then you actually just find yourself more balanced.
We're talking about person and character,
Yeah.
I think there are times when one does tend to take over. Obviously, in times of personal stress, the person that you are takes a priority. You've got to get through stuff. But there are other times, particularly when you're on tour, where I think the character takes over. And for some reason, that triggers for me this concept of passion versus ambition. They're close cousins. I try my best to be a passionate person. That it's passion that leads me to make the decisions I make, both on stage and off. But during the pandemic, I felt I had to have an ambitious mindset. I had to find new types of opportunities. I couldn't just follow this unfolding path that I had been on for 30 some years. So I started becoming more ambitious. So setting goals and ignoring window shopping along the way, just going for that. And that doesn't agree with me. It just doesn't agree with me at all. I find that the list of things I have to do sort of comes off the page and turns into this dark cloud or weights around my neck. And that was one of the reasons I think I had a hard time towards the end. I had to go and follow the joy again, be a much more of a passionate person. You also mentioned the forest. Was it Jeanette Winterson who wrote that passion isn't a path through the forest, it is the forest, or something through the dark? Beautiful quote about how passion doesn't guide you through the forest. It actually takes you to the deep, dark center of the forest.
And so yeah, that it's also like that. It is the forest, and that it is actually all of it. I've been sort of uh, consumed by this idea lately of the whole is always there. And anytime I am thinking about something or have some emotions, or even like more concretely, when I express something, as soon as I say something about the situation, I am somehow limiting it, because it is the whole forest at the whole time. And you try to look for paths, and you go through the paths that you eventually always walk that same path. And then that means that there's all these aspects, all these things that you don't see, or don't think, or so whilst your desires or your passions, they are always all of the things at the same time, and it's a fully three-dimensional thing, or even four-dimensional with time as well. And that whenever we're going through anything or make any thoughts about it, it somehow limits it to just that one thing, which might be true. And I think this is part of this reason why there's like a plurality or multiplicity of truths about anything when we talk about what we do now. It's because people are coming at it from another point of views. I'm going like, there's on some level, I think we agree, but we're coming at it from two different points of view, and both have limited, and all of a sudden your roads might cross in that forest, and then you can, oh wow, you're doing this whole other thing inside the same kind of passion that we have. So I like that.
About choices. You're talking a lot about choices. I mean, there's several things that triggers for me. One is that a choice for any one thing is a choice against millions of other options. That's the first thing. So you're losing more than you're gaining by making any choice. Importantly for me is also, nonetheless, make choices. Otherwise, other elements will make them for you. Yeah.
Very good point.
And I think that folds back on passion versus ambition. I tend to look at, particularly when I'm teaching, and looking at the choices people make on stage, is if you have an eye on getting to the end of the road, I would consider that ambition. Your goal is to get to the end of the road. The passionate person, however, may set that as a goal, but can stop and window shop along the way. Indeed, they can actually go into the shops and have a look around. Actually, if there's a back door out of that shop that is alluring, they are also totally free to take those. So passion serves you, but I think you serve ambition. In a way. Yeah.
But that's it. It's really, really interesting as well. Like, yeah, I've mind, I don't know, I wrote it in for something, and the thing that my eye on the prize never got me what I wanted. I don't quite remember where I have written this, but it is something about that, which mirrors this thing with passion and ambition as well. Like I know that there are many things that I should do, fix up my website, or make some more attempts into getting some other types of work or whatever. But I find it so hard, and strangely hard, to do those kinds of things, to direct it, to do these direct kind of. And most of my life, I've been lucky to just be in quite a bit of this kind of passionate state that you sort of talk about. And I've had enough of interest from the outside when I then finally have emerged with something that I've been lucky that people come with some artistic content, that people have then seen that and gone, oh, that's useful, or I've been able to get enough work through that without doing the kind of set myself a goal of where I want to be. But I often feel like I somehow should do that's what one should do when you are a successful artist or whatever.
Well, just generally, Frodo, I mean, this is what's pushed, hey, set goals. And I mean, they put it in the water. They put that stuff in the water, like got to set goals and forget everything else. Don't, I think of one of the definitions of clown is fully committed but easily distracted, which I think is a really good edict of how to get through life, Yeah, I guess the more Buddhist way would be hold on tight, let go lightly. But I think people just hold on tight. That's all they do, generally speaking. And we're encouraged to do that. I think it might be a little bit conspiratorial, but it's very convenient if people are scared and holding on damn tight. because they're not looking around. Because often you referencing back to what you said, the answer is often behind you.
Yeah. It's also that, I mean, didn't Angela de Castro in How to Be Stupid or whatever, she said that charisma is the pleasure of being there. And that's what, if you're always on your way somewhere else, you are, you're too busy with driving, to use a metaphor from your work or whatever, your previous work was like, then it's like you're on this train and you're just trying to pull people, get them into the carriages and go as far as you can, whilst you who have so much experience within clown, like that idea. And when I read that, I've not had the pleasure of working or going through her workshops or anything. I've just read that, but it rang so true. Sometimes somebody steps out onto that stage, and before they've even done anything, they are just there in the moment, and they're really seeing the audience, and they are happy in this place. That charisma comes from that. They come out and they're so happy that finally I'm here. Like, I've been hungry throughout this pandemic, and now I'm out there and you're there, and I hope I'm radiating this emotion of how happy I am to be here.
That's the double-edged sword, though, of being on stage, isn't it? I can't remember. It could be Henry Skeps or somebody said that being a good performer is the shame of being in the moment and the pride of doing exactly that.
Yeah.
That's double-edged sword.
Yeah, to me, I have that it's that same thing, but to me, what then justifies it, because that's like what I feel like is an easy, or is a early clowning 101 mistake, is that you go out and you're only happy to be there, and you go with every opportunity, and there is nothing actually happening, because once you are on the stage, there's also this contract that the audience is kind of expecting you to do something or actually transport them somewhere. So whether that's improvised or whatever it is, but you do have to have, as I express, it's like you have to have something to show, something there that will leave them better off. And that's in the expectation that people have of shows, it's usually that you are offering them up more than what's kind of just in the moment. That's what captures them first, and they can capture but then the fact that you actually have either you have enough experience to sort of to pull in a completely improvised sort of setting, or you have some pre-prepared stuff, which I always think should always have the pre-prepared stuff.
Fall back on.
And and if the clown gods give you something amazing and you manage to wrap that up as the show, then do that. But a lot of the time, the situations are less than ideal. You need to give them something first. So to me, it's that sort of balance. It's like you got to be happy to be there, but then you also have to have something to share.
Look, Frodo, you craft your work very, very well. At the same time, what you do on stage is only the gift wrapping. What anyone does on stage is only the gift wrapping. It can be wonderful and beautiful, and it should encourage trust of the audience and all this sort of stuff. But unless there's something in the box, it's just bad Hollywood, isn't it, really?
That's a wonderful metaphor. Or I love this question. This is very interesting. I'd love for you to unpack that a little bit. I have read it, you saying it, and it feels to me so deep. This thing of you've put words on something which I haven't managed to put words on myself. The fact that I guess I always just express it as in you come on stage and then you do something, but I always want the audience to have the feeling that there's something more going on underneath or alongside.
I think that's at least in my style and the performers and performances that I love, it's exactly that something is done on stage, something is presented on stage, but it is not delivered to you on a silver spoon. It is not fed to you. It engages me because it's incomplete. There's a puzzle, there's a question, there's a riddle. I need to find myself in that. I need to make sense of it. It's not too abstract, so it's not bad free jazz that has no melody, not that there isn't good free jazz. So it has to have some human aspect, but not give it to me all on a plate. And I think that the great performers have material that is crafted, that holds its own. However, there's always this depth, this it's just a metaphor for something they want to deliver. What they actually, what's inside the gift is often very concealed. And I think the best performances are the ones where if there's an audience of 300, there are 300 different stories. Because the audience is more than half of the equation. What the story is lays in the audience, not in the performer. And I think particularly, this is a challenge because we like to be clear. We like to be understood. We like to make sure everyone's with us. And we have to learn the confidence to let go of that, to tell our story, to experience our story on stage and let them make sense of it, let them make their sense of it. And that does take courage. It's the ego will fight against that. We'll try to telegraph what you're doing, all of that sort of stuff. It comes back, we started this conversation talking about the character and the person. Particularly in the workshops that I do, I try to focus on 3 prime voices that I believe make things simple for performers to understand, and that is the voice of the person inside, the voice of the character inside, and the voice of the artist inside. Where the person is interested in control, predictability, knowing where they're going, having a plan, no risk, safe, as we are in everyday life. This goes back to primordial times and primitive times when, 5 people went down to the water hole at lunch and 3 came back. I might leave it a little while. It's sort of being safe, making clear choices. The character being the opposite of that, chaotic, give me the risk, give me the thrill, give me the rush. In other words, safety last. However, on stage, that's no good either. You get this indulgent sort of flow that's bad free jazz. And the artist's voice, who is responsible for taking the wonderful human impulses that the person has and then giving them over to the character to play with for just long enough. And then so this sort of moderator. They're the 3 things that I think are important on stage, and is trying to find a balance between those things of not letting the person hijack the show with their bad Hollywood directing and their interest in being safe and concealed and hidden and not revealed, and the character's problem with just bloody never knowing when to stop and forgetting all about the audience. It's that 3-way relationship.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I love that. Also, like when you say bad free jazz, that's my shorthand for that is the artist who makes a painting, and it usually is then abstract, spontaneous kind of art. And once you're done with it and you can't quite tell what it is, then they call it Untitled 36. That to me is this thing of going, well, you not only have you, it's like if you're giving the audience nothing, you're just going, I just did this, or I made this, now you deal with it. That's like how I think of exactly that same kind of idea. I think it's you always have to have something to show. But anyway, this thing with dividing it up into the person and the character and the artist, this is very interesting. You have, I mean, that kind of stuff. I mean, I think that they're always going on at the same time. But when you divide something up like that, you can kind of, it's like a tool that you use to analyze what you do. And you do a lot of workshops and stuff. Maybe we should just talk a little bit about that, about like your workshops and your work and as a clown teacher. Because when I first encountered you, when I came to Australia and to the Australian Circus Festival in 2000, was the first one I did. You were teaching clown, and I was and you were doing shows then with as Oscar and Strudel
with Trent Smith.
With Trent Smith. And I was blown away and everything. And then over the next little bit, you started doing correct me if I'm wrong, but you started doing the All Aboard show, the train show, which was also very cute and so, to me, highly original, beautiful. And then now you're doing the Panopticon? No, what is it you call it?
Panorama Kino Theatre.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I spoke over that. Say it one more time.
Panorama Kino Theatre.
Panorama Kino Theatre, yeah. So you've done so much amazing work, but I thought maybe we'd just talk a little bit about, because I love the fact that you're a teacher as well, and you were teaching back then, and that's now 23 years ago, and you weren't new to it then. So because you're speaking from a kind of clown sensibility, and what did you do training as a clown?
Yeah, I did. I worked with Philip Gaulier when he was based out of London, and I also did numerous stages, including the aforementioned Angela de Castro, who came to Australia many years ago. I did that together with the Rock and Roll Circus and all the crew then, and numerous other workshops along the way. But a lot of this, it just resonated with me. And early on in my performing career, and after doing some training with Philip and Angela and a whole bunch of others, as the years have gone by, I realised that the whole clowning, language and is not just applicable to becoming let's call it a clown, but it's the fundamentals of a whole lot of wonderful performing. You don't have to be funny on stage to benefit from having studied clowning. I think it really bottoms you out as a human being. It really, the whole idea of failure and revelation, these are crucial to being good performers, because you shouldn't hide. You shouldn't be hiding on stage. You should have the courage to reveal your story, to tell your story, to show your humanity. And I think clown training is fantastic for two things. One, resynapsing, which is actually an anatomical, physical thing that happens. We all have tendencies. We all have synapses built into us that if situation B happens, this is my go-to reaction. Some of those are great. Some of those, particularly as performers, are really bad. In other words, go the safety first. Run away from that because it will reveal something. In other words, green light is good, red light is bad. I think as performers, we have to learn to resynapse that stuff where red is good and green is boring. And that takes a while. That takes training. And that comes back to impulses, learning to recognize impulses. They're so easy to gloss over. They're so easy to bulldoze through. If the person has an objective, they will ignore all the wonderful stuff that happens along the way. So I think learning to recognize impulses is super key. They might seem small, but any impulse will do. If you have a shift of impulse, something significant has happened, something of interest is going on.
That's great, yeah. Being in the moment and to recognize what it is that's happening. And of course, it's like sometimes something happens on stage and I feel like you want to respond to it. And maybe I feel like, this is the obvious thing to say. And you wanting to be an original performer, you go, I somehow don't want to say the obvious thing, but then the more you give yourself into just sharing the experience with the audience when something happens off the cuff, and to point that out. Sometimes that's why people laugh so much if somebody knocks over a glass and you just point it out, going taxi or whatever, just some little joke. Everybody, the whole room comes together because we just shared that same kind of shared the same moment. But I was thinking of your idea there about clown being fundamental as a performer, and to me, I couldn't agree more. It is such a good clown is also the only kind of training that happens within the circus community or so that really deals with showmanship, or really deals with how to interact with an audience on a three-dimensional level. Because so much when you're doing Chinese pole, you're doing drills or handstands, the skill level is so high that there's more of a sort of pulse of where you're busy doing your skills and then you're looking out, if you're looking out at all. Because a lot of the time, just saw a wonderful show called Joy in Finland now over Christmas, and there was a young woman who did an amazing a pole act, but it was almost like she had specifically crafted it for us just to sit on the outside like Gibson kind of, and you're watching on the inside her in there. And I was wondering, and of course, there's lots of skin because that's the nature of those kind of poles. It was like one of those poles, not with rosin on it, but and it was like a stripper style pole that could be turned on and off from sliding, so you could do it. Was amazingly technical. But I was kind of wondering, once I'm sitting out here and you're not acknowledging that I'm here, all I can look at then is like, it changes the idea of what it is. And I just thought that is one more example of where people who do amazing skills or whatever and are so focused on the skill learning, because to get to a level of Olympic level, whatever, you got to focus so much on just the skills that you forget this kind of connection. And that's why I kind of think that clowning, or when I did Circus Media with Bim Mason, he was just calling those classes performance.
Yep.
And I think of it as showmanship. It's the bit where the human being, the man, takes really understands that this is a show and what the show is, what the experience is for the audience. And maybe when you just focus on your skills, all you're focusing on is what you have to show. So it almost gets this fourth wall.
Frodo, for me, particularly where you're talking about circus stuff and skill stuff versus showmanship stuff, perhaps, there are two aspects in the circus. One of what I would consider the flyers, including the handstanders, the trapeze artists, this high-level skill stuff. And to me, they symbolise our hopes and ambitions, ultimately speaking, immortality, right? Flying and immortality.
Yeah.
And then you have the clowns, who symbolise the actuality of our situation here on Earth, which is we're all ignorant and stupid and don't really have a clue what's going on. And from that point alone, we can identify with the clowns a lot more. Right? We hope to be able to fly. We have these wonderful ambitions to do that, but our reality is this, all being stupid, wonderfully so. So I think the clown has a wonderful humanity, and that's why I think to study the clown gives you the potential to have a wonderful humanity on stage as well. And the only thing that interests an audience are human things.
I couldn't agree more. That is a wonderful statement. And I think, and what I think then is the same as when you talk about like we have the Hollywood movies, who are all the ones with the biggest budgets, who are kind of then made by a committee because everybody has to have a say because they've put money into it or whatever, and you need to do that. And then you end up in more cases than not with a cliche story of going on the persona, like you said, of safety. Everyone is going for, well, we should have a beautiful woman. She should look in this particular way. We should have a hero that's like that. So you end up falling into a predictable kind of story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, I was making the point. I got lost along the way there but anyway, that if you have this so the point being is that you might want to only be a flyer. You might want to show perfection in movement, whether it be through dance or through your physical skill with the risk involved when you're doing trapeze or whatever, and you show your immortality as a kind of idea. But you could still do that and have this human foundation beneath, because you might find other ways or deeper ways or unusual ways for that apparatus to express your immortality by having spent some time on the floor being truly human as well, and explore what that is. So I guess that's just a long-winded way of saying that this clowning or performance as a to acknowledge the situation of a show, and where you come in and know this artificiality of it, that's going to be useful throughout your career. So I often find that people come out from a circus school and the acts that they have made are difficult to make a living from. The few people who just have made their amazing abstract beautiful circus act on some apparatus that needs 6 points of rigging and everything, and it comes out and then goes straight into a show and continues to do that. So much of what we do, at least to make ends meet and to make it work, it's like you end up doing some shows on the street, or you end up doing some gigs at a shopping center, or you end up doing events where you're just doing it off in a corner and you have to fight for your own attention. So if you just have your abstract act and all you have is those 5 minutes of your act, but if you have this performance or clown training first, then you can expand into so much more. So I think it should be fundamental in circus schools. And to wrap all of this up then is that what I find in so much of contemporary circus now, like what Circa, and I come and think in Australia, what Circa is doing, and what Gravity and other myths, for instance, are doing. It is all the kind of what is it? The immortality and the flyers, but we've sort of lost the clown in these things. There aren't so many funny things in these shows, and maybe that it's just
Frodo, I think there's various perspectives there. One is certainly a pedagogical one of a lot of the circus schools. I've just been up to the Code Art Circus School to teach in Rotterdam, and a bunch of stuff. And it's fairly endemic to circus schools that they are predominantly, and it's a generalization, but fairly skills based. Yeah.
Yep.
Not least of all, a lot of circus schools around the world are maybe not quite so much anymore, but trying to get their students into opportunities like Cirque du Soleil and stuff. And Cirque du Soleil have a checklist: gymnastics, no clowning, no, what we want is flick flacks. Okay, so it's skills-based stuff. We'll do the costumes and we'll turn them into personages when we get hold of them. So I think there's a pedagogical aspect to it, or a curriculum thing. I totally agree that there should be more performance skills stuff rather than just technical. I asked the students, my first question up in Rotterdam was, how would you describe yourself very shortly? And most of them said, I'm a circus artist. And I replied, I walked around yesterday having a look. I see a lot of circus technicians. Where's the art? Let's dive into that. Because you've used the word artist. So where's the art? You're just showing off, aren't you? Really? I was quite provocational there. And that's how we entered this whole world of sharing human things, fallibility, failure, all of this sort of stuff. The other aspect about the whole skills versus performance skills, or technical skills versus performing, and charisma and all these things. You mentioned it before, to get to Olympic standard, you've got to dedicate yourself to busting your ass to achieve those skills. And I think along the way, the distraction or the polar opposite, which is fallibility and the human stuff, I think it just gets swept away. You can't do both with the level and the standards. Okay, it's just enormous. I'm lucky. I headed off at the age of 21, traveling around the world. I ended up at the circus base in London, wanting to be a juggler, a technical juggler. Damn right. I walked in and the Germans were there, and 2 minutes later I went, well, there goes that idea. I've got no chance to compete with these guys. One, I'm not prepared to do that many hours. I don't have the mindset for it. And there's other things that interest me other than throwing plastic objects around in the air. I thank them very, very much for that harsh, brutal lesson. And so
so
I looked
funny.
at my options. I just looked at my options, and I'm so glad for it. I'm so glad that look, I still like to juggle on stage with the Oscar and Strudel show and stuff, but it is totally an excuse to deliver something else. I'm not trying to impress anyone.
No, of course, we're talking it's just funny because I went to Circus Media and I was there to perfect my 5 balls and just be this amazing juggler. And there was 2 Germans there who did exactly the same thing for me. I know those guys too. And they were just working on their 7 clubs and I was doing 5 balls and I was like, okay, maybe I won't be the Olympic style juggler there. And they knocked me into what my strength was anyway. When I then did performance classes with Ben Mason and we were doing, I realized, okay, this is where I belong.
I'll jump in there. Maybe this thing we're talking about, immortality and stuff like that, maybe as performers we have to ask ourselves that question, is that what we're after? And if so, we have to be very careful. In other words, am I becoming a juggler to try to achieve immortality? And that's a dangerous path to go down, because as much as being a good performer is about sharing and revealing stuff, I think that's really self-centered in a way. We all have these, either traumatic reasons for being performers, or, look at me, mum, or whatever it happens to be. But I think we have to learn to understand and I think we continually need to revise why we do what we do, why we are performers or showmen. Interesting. Just
it's great.
And coming back to the showman, you said before, I just got a little note here. I think charisma and the skills of a showman are about embracing anything that happens on stage. It's the confidence to deal with any feelings, especially negative ones. We sing in my workshops too, because it's a very naked kind of experience. And there's a lot to be learned from it. And I always say to the group that people like Ella Fitzgerald, Otis Redding, these things, I don't think they were comfortable necessarily on stage. I think they embraced the discomfort and they used that as a force. So I think super important is accepting any feelings that you might have on stage and not being fearful of embarrassment or shame or mistakes or anything like that. I think most of us know that's the first hurdle to get over, is stop trying to pretend and hide the human things that happen.
Yeah. Just acknowledging what's actually going on. Sometimes that's so refreshing. It's probably always been the case, but maybe it is highlighted now as well, where the presentation of self through social media and we are always aware of our presentation of self, of course, and it probably has always been the case, but it feels like maybe it's come to a head now as with the situation that we're at, and to just see somebody out there and you have a goal in mind of what you're going to do. Like, okay, I'm in a while, I'm going to get on a unicycle, I'm going to juggle the fire. But that's not the key thing here. Or it is, and it isn't. It's like the only reason why we're here are the skills, in a way. But I kept saying when I was doing this work with Tom Flanagan and a bunch of these acrobat boys, making a new show for Brett Haylock, who made La Clique and La Soirée. And I kept saying to them, because they were like, oh, should we do this trick or should we do that trick? And I kept saying, well, got to remember that the skills are the filler. They're just a filler that we do so that we keep their attention or whatever. But what is it that we're actually doing? We're giving these manufacturing good times for these people. And there's something in there of that duality of, like, we do need skills, that we're going to get on a bike and juggle the fire, but along the way, that's actually what it's about. Like, so we all care when they finally juggle on the bike, or we finally care when Superman saves the world. We finally care at the end of the movie when the hero gets the reward.
In other words, you're coming down to why and what does it mean? A tall unicycle, and what does it mean? And this opens a whole bunch of stuff. Now, we know from research, not necessarily mine, that humans are programmed to figure out patterns. This goes back to, again, coming out of the cave and realizing that only 3 people came back from the water hole. So the pattern there is lunchtime, not good, right? So that's why I think this modern day fascination with things like Sudoku and these puzzles and all that sort of stuff. It's also the convenient for us comedians of how to tell a joke. 1 point is a point, 2 points makes a line. And with that line, with that pattern, people are able to predict what will come next. Of course, we give them an alternate reality and an alternate logic, which totally stuffs up their mind, and they laugh to release that tension. That's the fundamentals of a joke. So what does it mean on stage when you present your gift, or when you present the actual excuse that you're delivering on stage, fire, juggling, tall unicycle, whatever it happens to be? The audience is going to get super busy looking for information about where this could be going. So they're already starting to try to look into the future. As a performer, you have to factor in that anything you do on stage is important information from them. Yeah. You mentioned about the falling glass. All you have to do is look at it, and you've acknowledged that this is something in my show. Yeah. Don't ignore it. It's up to you then, the skill of the artist and the director and the performers and everyone else, to have a general sense of what that information will bring to the audience. What fantasy will it wake up in the audience, from my perspective, and to guide them, not prescribe what they should feel, but sort of guide them that anything that happens on stage is actually very, very important for that matrix that they're creating. I always ask the people, particularly the ones I'm directing, but what does it mean? Well, I spent 10 years learning how to do it. Yeah, but it has no part in this show. Yeah, you've got to be brutal here. It's not in. It's just confusing the issue. Yeah, but it's, Frodo, when you put something in the show, what informs you that brutal decision of putting something in or leaving something out? Why do you put stuff in a show?
And on that exciting cliffhanger, we cut this episode short, and you must wait if you're listening to this as it's coming out, which I know several hundred of you are doing immediately when it comes out. Then you have to wait. And if you have come to this at a later date, then you will be able to just go straight to the next episode. And I'd just like to say a couple of things about that. And one of the, why am I dividing up these conversations and not just giving you guys the 4-hour long version of my conversations with Gareth about the ingredients of comedy? And some of the practical, boring stuff is that I have a certain upload limit as to how much I can put up on the subscription plan that I have with the podcast providers hosting me, which is, it's a practical thing or whatever. But the other thing is that with all the other stuff that's going on in my life and trying to be present for my family and doing shows and coming up with new stuff, and excitingly at the moment I am writing. I'm 5 episodes into writing what will be the next season, where I deliver monologues, where I tell it as I see it. I'm going to talk about play, and I'm going to talk about showmanship, the very origins of it. And it's all very exciting to me. It's breaking new ground in my thinking as I'm fleshing it out, because writing something out is really a big part of my artistic process. So that's all exciting. But the other thing is that, so the point of that is to say, I haven't got the capacity to do these long conversations with and upload the whole thing. So I am spacing it out in part because I haven't got capacity to have that many conversations. And also, as you might have noticed, I don't know if it's clear, but the only people that I have spoken to here are people who are already aware of the podcast. I haven't cold called anyone and said, hey, would you like to come on a podcast with me? So the people who come here are already aware of the kind of conversation that's going on here. And I'm totally aware that it is very gender biased at the moment, and I am in the process of trying to rectify that. But because everything has been slightly I'm just responding to what has been offered to me, then there is a bias in that kind of response too, a little bit. So anyway, those are some of the reasons for why the podcast is turning out how it is. I haven't, apart from this conversational part of it at least, the other aspect of it where I'm writing, that's kind of where a lot of my energy goes. And these conversations, it might be a push and pull kind of where I'm going into myself and writing these next seasons. And then I'm having conversations in the meantime. And I for one, am really enjoying it. And from some of the response as well, I get that you guys are enjoying it too. And now we've spoken about some of these things. So, if you do enjoy the podcast, then please tell your friends. Go on social media or send them a letter. It'd be really awesome to hear a story about somebody who sent a letter to someone and said, hey, I think the thoughts that are being spoken of, the world of ideas that are being visited every second week along the way of the showman, is just a place for you. I wrote it in a letter because I thought it was important for you to know. Anyway, it is great to have these times with you. And until next time, all that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love. And I hope to see you along the way.